Hello and welcome to Cooking Time. We have a really special show for you today. We're doing an hour-long show with a fabulous menu. We're going to make this beautiful salad with baby greens, some people say field greens, a potpourri of baby greens, just some wonderful spring greens, mesclun greens. Million names for it, but baby greens. With some diced pears that we're going to balsamic syrup. We're going to cut up some orange to put with that, some gorgonzola cheese, and some candied spiced pecans. Out of this world. You can just eat a bowl of those alone. They're so good. So that's going to be our first course. Then we're going to have a wonderful creamy Madeira infused wild mushroom soup. We're going to make individual beef Wellingtons, and we're going to make a lobster and shrimp risotto. And to finish it all off, individual liquid center chocolate cakes, some people molten lava cakes. A wonderful, wonderful recipe from a local gentleman who teaches here, Stephen Capodicasa. Just a fabulous, fabulous chef, and I love his recipe, and that's going to really finish off this, this menu. So we're going to get right down to with our soup. I think the soup will be the first thing we'll get started with. We're going to put a pot on a medium heat and put a little bit of olive oil in. Now we need to get some leeks chopped up for this. Leeks, you need to be really careful when you get them and wash them. You need to slice your leek down, take the green off, take the root end off, and then flush water through it because dirt and sand gets trapped in all these different layers. Once it's all cleaned, you change boards, change knives to make sure that there's no dirt on your board, dirt on your knife, and then slice up this leek into little slivers. A funny story, when I had an instructor here and she was making a dish with leek, a fabulous teacher who's now passed on, Annie Casal, God rest her soul. She said that she was making a dish with leek and her father-in-law came over when she first got married, a wonderful, proper Italian gentleman. And after she made the dish, she realized she probably didn't wash the leek real well. And with all that sand and grit, boy, it just gets in your teeth when you're biting. And he was trying to figure out a way to be polite. And at the end of the dinner, he said to her in his wonderful Italian accent, "Anna, this was a wonderful dish. No making no more for me." I thought that was just such a funny story. It was all about properly washing the leeks. So we've got ours washed real well. Annie, I'm sure you're watching. You'll see my leeks are good. Pop will want to come eat it again. So we're going to saute these down, and in the meantime, we're going to get our mushrooms and chop those up. I've got shiitake mushrooms. I've taken the stems off. I've got some wonderful oyster mushrooms, and of course some little white button mushrooms, which are grown in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, in a warehouse in the dark. We're going to slice up all of our mushrooms. Remember to take those stems off the shiitakes because those stems are pretty tough. Don't throw them away. You can saute them down and collect the liquid that you saute them in and press them out and get all that wonderful shiitake juice. We don't want to get any color on these leeks. We just want them to get nice and tender. As we're getting these mushrooms sauteed, we'll add those in. Just slicing up these button mushrooms. You don't have to go too crazy with them. They don't have to be in too tiny of a piece. And then we have some wonderful porcini mushrooms that I've got soaking in some water. We bought them dried, and we're simply going to reconstitute them. Dried mushrooms are fabulous because they have a whole lot of flavor, and when you reconstitute them, of course, the liquid that they're in, don't throw that away. That goes right in the soup. Now, I say this is a creamy dish, but there's actually no cream in it at all. We're going to use a technique that's similar to making a roux to get these nicely thickened when we saute everything together. I think that's enough of our mushrooms. 2 more pieces of the wine. Sometimes the mushrooms soak up all the oil. You can put a little butter in here if you like. Put in a drop more oil, just so it's nice and moist. Usually after cooking this for a minute, the mushroom will start to release all of their liquid. Here's our reconstituted porcini mushrooms from Italy. You have to be careful with the liquid from the mushroom because after you reconstitute these, as with the leek, some dirt gets trapped in these mushrooms when they're dried. So we'll let this liquid settle again. And then we'll pour off all but a little bit into our pot, just as you would if you were pouring a fine wine and expecting a little residue, because we wouldn't want to get that dirt in there and then have it gritty when you're eating it. Got my chicken stock in a couple of crocks here. I'm actually going to add a little cayenne pepper to this. I like to make it a little spicy. Spice is good. Okay, now the technique I was talking about, it's called Sanger. Similar to making a roux. When we make a roux, we take a fat and we take flour, equal parts, and we saute it down in a pot for a couple of minutes to get the starchiness out, and then we add a liquid, and the roux thickens the liquid. You can never add a roux to liquid. It'll just form one big lump. So here, we've sauteed our mushroom and our leek down in some olive oil, and as I said, you can put a little butter if you'd like. And now, we're going to add our flour, which in effect creates the roux. And that technique is actually called Sanger. You can do this with any type of a start for a soup. If you were sauteing leeks and broccoli and then did the Sanger technique, you'd have kind of a creamy broccoli soup. Cook this around a little bit to get our starchiness out. Now we need our Madeira wine. Remember, this is a Madeira infused soup. We won't put any salt and pepper in this until the very end. Now we're going to add some chicken stock. We are using homemade chicken stock. If you can't get homemade chicken stock, shame on you. No, only kidding. You can go to the store and buy some stock in a can. It'll be listed as broth. When you get that broth home, the best thing to do is to put it in a pot with some cut up carrot, celery, and onion, and simmer it for about 20 minutes, and then strain it out. And you'll have a much richer, more fortified stock, which will take the edge off of that store-bought canned stock or broth and make it a little closer in flavor to what you want, and that's a homemade. Okay, we're going to let this simmer now, and we're going to start one of our next dishes, which is our individual molten lava chocolate cakes. Folks, I'm jumping around a whole lot, so if you see me bouncing in and out of the camera, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. We're melting a little butter, if I can get it in a crock. In with that, we're putting some chocolate. Now, normally we do this on a double boiler, but I have a pretty well-controlled stove here, and I am using a very heavy bottom copper pot, which will make for very even heat distribution. If you're nervous about the consistency of and distribution of heat on your stove, then by all means do this over a double boiler. So we melt down the butter, and as that's melting, we're going to add some chocolate to that. I just want to get a little more melted in the bottom of the pan. Here's our chocolate. Our soup is bubbling nicely. and it's really thickening up and getting rich and creamy. Just going to lower that heat down a little bit. Now that our chocolate is melting, we're going to add some sugar to that. And a little vanilla extract. And a tiny bit of salt. Do a quick cleanup, get rid of some stuff. This is just about melted. We need another minute or so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to whisk some eggs into this. And then after we whisk the eggs in, we're going to put some flour. We're going to put this all into some nice little buttered ramekins. So while that's melting down, we've got our ramekins and some butter. So I'm simply going to take that butter, go around all the ramekins. You know we film live to tape. That means if I sneeze, if I cough, you're going to see it. So all of this is being done in real time. We are going to take a bit of a break at the very end just to plate everything up. But here's our ramekins. It's better to over butter than under butter. So don't worry about putting what you might think is a little bit too much. I'd rather have them over buttered so they come out of the ramekins nicely. Okay, our chocolate's melted nicely. I'm going to take that off the stove. I like to stir it for another minute to kind of cool it down a bit. Okay, letting that cool for a sec, whisking it around, and we're going to get our eggs. Hopefully they won't roll away on me. Just crack our eggs into the bowl. This way we're set, and we can add them one by one as we're whisking this. That was one. Here goes the second one. And number 3. Now we start adding our flour. Careful not to whisk too fast like I just did, and flour flies up in your face. Okay, we want this just like that, nice and creamy. Okay, we've got our ramekins. Just pour some of this lovely batter in each one. Oh, this is looking so nice. Now for the liquid center part. We have some wonderful hunks of chocolate. We're going to just press those right into the center of each. Lay them on a pan and pop them in the oven. They only bake for about 8 minutes. It's a really quick dish. Okay, now we have to jump on our salad. Check our soup again. I think we need a tad bit more chicken in this. Boy, this is so rich and lovely. Okay, remember the salad I said we have pears and oranges and toasted nuts. So for our candied spiced pecans, we have a wonderful blend of spices. There's allspice, there's star anise, there's cinnamon, there's nutmeg, there's clove, there's sugar, there's even curry powder. That's what makes this such a wonderful exotic type of a dish. We've got some pecans. I'm just going to give you a little demo on this. We've got our spice mixture all ready to go here, and you can email us for all these recipes. We put our pecans into some egg white, and we just mix those around to moisten them up nicely. We want them to be coated wonderfully with the egg white. Then we take them from the egg white and put them into the spice mixture. And once they're coated with the spice mixture, we're going to just pick them out and put them in our little pan and bake them off in the oven. Here's another one. And here we go. So we're just going to throw those in the oven as well. And we'll have our wonderful candied spiced pecans. Now we have our pears. A little bit of a trick with the pear. We slice it in half. We want to pull all the seeds out of it. I take a melon baller, put it right over where the seeds live, I call that the sacket, and just press down and scoop it out. And we have the seeds and the pear completely separate. And then I'm going to just cut out this little bit of stem on both ends. Just cut a nice little wedge. And that gets discarded as well. And then we can take our pear, make one more slice, and then we can just dice this up for our salad. I'm slicing one direction in a 1/2 inch, and then the opposite direction in a 1/2 inch. And when I'm all done, I have my wonderfully diced pear that I will put a little bit of balsamic syrup over. And just mix that all up. When we do this dish in the fall or the winter, we actually poach the pears in a red wine poaching liquid. But for this time of year, when it's a bit warmer out, we like to do these pears just with some balsamic syrup, which is wonderful. Now, our oranges. Little trick to the orange. Cleaning up as we're going along. Okay, a little more technique involved here with the orange. You slice both ends off the orange. And then this is the zest on the outside. This white is the pith, and the inside here is the flesh. We want to put the knife between the zest and actually between the pith and the flesh. And just watch, I take this little piece off. I want to shave down to the flesh. So I shave right down and try and cut on an angle all around and peel this entire orange. Yes, you need a sharp knife for this. Yes, you need to focus on this. And yes, you need to practice to get this right. But as anything else, you do it a couple of times and it'll look just as simple as it does when I'm doing it here. Then you flip it over and just take a look to see if you need to clean off any of that little white pith. That white pith is a bit bitter in flavor, and it really doesn't have any good nutrition to it. So there's no good use for that. So we want to just discard all that. And then we're going to slice this orange into wonderful slices, and that'll be one of the side additives to our salad, which creates what we call a composed or compound salad. So here's all of our orange slices, or pear. Okay, we're in good shape. I guess I could start building the salad. We have our greens that I want to put a little bit of salt and pepper. A little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And of course, that wonderful balsamic syrup. Or if you have some wonderfully aged balsamic, it'll work just as well. Just take a look at our nuts and our cake. Okay, looking good. Okay, this is just about ready to plate. We have all of our ingredients prepped here for the salad. Let's come back and take a look at our soup. It looks good, but does it taste good? We'll have to see. First time, I can dip with the spoon. But that's it. I get one shot dip spoon. We need some salt. A little more pepper. I can get that nice little bite of the cayenne. I have Jennifer helping me today. Jennifer, could I have a dinner plate for the salad? Now my second dip with my spoon is like this. I think it's pretty good. Here's my plate. It's like things just appear. They come from out of nowhere. But it's really Jennifer handing me stuff. I gotta taste one more taste. I learned this scam when I was a kid. I'll keep my spoon here now, knowing that it was in my mouth. Whenever my mother used to ask me to taste things, and this goes back to when I was 4 and we used to make meatballs together, she would always ask me to come and taste whatever. Does it need salt? Does it need garlic, cheese, pepper? And she recognized that I had a pretty good sense of taste and balance. And so I would come and taste everything. And of course, being a kid, you figure out quickly how to get the most. So I would taste, and I would be telling her to put ever so small amounts of just any, it needs another grain of salt, Ma, until she finally shooed me away and realized that I was just working the system and getting many more tastes than I really should for a regular tasting. Okay, so we have some wonderfully dressed greens. And I like to kind of mound my greens up in a nice little pile. Those nuts. Pretty good. My oranges. Oop, all connected. Flying oranges. My pears. Take your time when you're doing this. This is just a lot of fun for me to style up the plate. Kind of like Pavlov's dog. Let me get my cheese. This is some Gorgonzola cheese. Of course, those wonderful nuts. They're just perfect. Break them in half a little bit and scatter them around. Maybe I'll put one big one on the top just to kind of let people know what they're in for. I figured I would plate up the salad so that you have something to eat while we're cooking the rest of the meal. So stay with us. We're going to be making next the beef Wellington and the risotto. We have the cakes in the oven, and we have our wonderful soup going on the stove that we'll plate up to give you at the next course. But start on your salad and you to watch, and we'll be making the beef Wellingtons. Okay, so I've got all my ingredients ready for the beef Wellington and the risotto. We're going to start the risotto first. As I said earlier, the leeks need to be cleaned really well. So we're going to start by adding some olive oil into our risotto pan. You can also use a little butter or a combination of butter and the oil. I'm slicing up these leeks without really looking because I'm talking to you all. But when I do this, my hands are clenched like an eagle's claw. And I'm holding what I'm doing with my thumb behind my fingers, and my fingers are bent in so that when the knife comes up and down, it never goes above my knuckles, so I can be slicing. Oh, only kidding. I can be slicing and not worry about cutting my fingers. So I get all of my leek cut, and I have some garlic I'm going to chop the same way. Again, all of this comes with practice, so you should never start chopping without looking if you haven't developed the technique for doing that. It's probably never a good idea to be chopping without looking, but I can because I'm the chef. We're going to slice up our shallot. We can use shallot, we can use onion. I like to use red onion sometimes, which adds more color. So remember, I've got a wonderful mixture here of the leek, the garlic, and the shallot. We've melted a little bit of olive oil in there. We could put some butter if we wanted to. Okay, I think we're good. Leek, shallot, garlic, substitute onion for the leek. Brush off my board. It's always good to have a garbage pail handy. Okay, make sure I have another wooden spoon clean. Remember, our soup is still cooking. Okay, while that's starting to saute, I need to get a jump on my mushroom Duxelles. Mushroom Duxelles, we're going to start, actually I'm going to put a little butter in that one, and I'm going to put a little butter in this one to start for the mushroom Duxelles. Butter just makes it a little more rich and sweet and creamy. So a little butter melting in the pan for the Duxelles, along with a little olive oil, which will prevent it from burning, or let it go to a higher temperature without burning. And then we need some shallot that we need to mince up nice and fine, taking my time to do this because I want this to be very, very nice. There's our shallot minced nicely. scraping that off using the back of the knife so I don't prematurely take the edge off my knife and make it dull. Nothing worse than a dull knife. And now I need to chop up a bunch of mushrooms. Got some pre-sliced mushrooms, and I'm just going to go through There's simple ways to do this when you're doing it in a big batch. You can take button mushrooms, whole, clean them off, and I mean clean them by brushing them with a little brush to get any dirt off them. Throw them into a pan. Take some shallots, quarter the shallots after they've been peeled, of course, and put your butter, your lemon juice. If you're putting a little bit of wine, as we will, we're going to put a little port wine, and then put it in a pot with a lid and cover it completely. Nice tight fitting lid. And put high heat on. And after a couple of minutes, those mushrooms will have released all their liquid. And then you'll see that all start to cook down. And when it all cooks down dry, put it into a food processor and just pulse it so it's chopped up nicely. Because if you're making this in a big batch, you're going to spend an awful lot of time with the shallots and the mushrooms, chopping them up. Here I'm the batch, no big deal. This one's going to be a little tough to manage because we have this risotto that I'm going to need to constantly be stirring. Here's my rice I'm introducing. Want to toast that rice around while this Duxelles is cooking down nicely. Now the risotto is a little tricky because you have to keep adding stock as you're doing it. We do this a lot in a pressure cooker, but I want to show you the traditional method. Doing it in the time we have allotted becomes a little tricky as well. So we're going to push the temperature up a little bit. Here's our white wine. This is actually a white wine that we got locally here in Westfield. And the nice thing about it is that the importer is actually also here in Westfield. A friend of mine, Jeff Mason, started importing wines from Italy. And so we're trying to use local items, maybe all the way from Italy, but brought in by a local. It's a wonderful Suave that's nice and crisp that we're adding to our risotto that'll work really nice with this. Boy, Jeff, I'm going to have to ask you to come over and dig into the cellar, bring some of those good bottles out when we get this meal done with this beef Wellington and this lobster and shrimp risotto. I'll call you when we're done. Now that we have our wine in, I'm just going to let that cook till it's dry. Here's our Duxelles starting to cook down. I want that to get nice and dry. And then I'm going to get another saute pan and I'm going to heat that up. And we're going to saute our pieces of filet mignon. Just going to let this go another minute. As this dries down, we're going to continue. I'm just going to tip this up to show you how it's dry. And then I'm going to add some stock to this, little at a time. And then we continue, and the stock is pre-warmed. And then we continue just to cook it until it dries. Once it dries up, then we add more stock. How long do we do that? Until it's done. How will I know it's done? I'll taste the rice. When the rice has a nice little bite to it, it'll be just fabulous. Okay, our mushroom Duxelles is looking good. Switch pans. Little drop of olive oil in here. Let that heat up. get our filet mignons out. Going to put our mushroom Duxelles right in this little bowl. Just getting away from all that little bit of oil that's in there. We'll save that for our assembly. I'm heating up this pan while that's heating. I'm checking my risotto. Plate juggler. Get them all spinning on the sticks, and then I have to go back and keep them in motion. Every time this dries up, just like this, see again, you can see it's nice and dry. I'm going to add a little bit more stock to it. Okay, season our steaks. These are pieces of filet mignon, salt and pepper. Pat them down, flip them over, season again. Make sure they're nice and even. Pan is nice and hot. It's going to smoke a little bit, but that's okay. Clean off my board. Get my area ready for the next assembly portion. Check my risotto again. I think we're in good shape, folks. Just going to put that vent on a little bit. We don't want to smoke out the house. We want these just nicely seared. See how they're nicely browned on one side? Checking always the risotto, checking the risotto. A little more stock. It's cooking down nicely. Can't go too fast with this. Okay, browned on that side. Going to move that right up here. I've got my puff pastry. 2 sheets. Let's get rid of this smoking pan. Check the risotto again. Always adding a little more stock. Okay, I think we can kill the fan. Now, we need an egg for our egg wash. Make sure you have a pastry brush on hand. All your ingredients lined up. Special treat for this. I have some pâté de foie gras, which is some wonderfully cooked, fattened duck liver, and all these little black specks in here are highly prized black truffle. Recently saw these black truffle in a market, and they were in a clear plexiglass box sitting on a bed of rice so that they're cushioned and they don't get bruised. There were some nice truffles. They weren't even that large. They were about maybe the size of a silver dollar, a bit bigger perhaps, but sometimes you get large truffle like a potato. And there was a price on them, $999 a pound. The pâté de foie gras, or regular straight foie gras, can be $60, $80 a pound if you're buying the absolute best A grade. And of course, the addition of the truffle makes this a very elegant dish. Check our risotto again. A little bit more liquid. Okay, and now here we go. I'm going to build two of these. I put down first some of my pâté de foie gras, truffle laced, of course. Nothing but the best for you guys. This is Westfield, the culinary mecca of New Jersey. Then we put our filet mignons on top. Not to forget our mushroom Duxelles, which goes right on the top. You see, we're just layering this. And then with our egg wash, we need to just go right around the perimeter. Now, I cut this piece of puff pastry, so it was a large sheet. I cut it into 4 so I could make nice individuals. You can, of course, do this with a whole filet mignon, but I like to do it with individuals so that everyone gets their own piece. Check the risotto. Can't do anything too long without checking the risotto. Okay, jumping back and forth a whole lot, I'm sorry, but this will be wonderful, I promise. Now we take this and we just stretch these corners out a little bit and tuck this right in on all sides. Then we over and stretch these little side pieces up and over so that it's completely encased in this puff pastry. Now put that on our tray. We have one. Here's our second one. Again, we tuck those corners up and over. These little corners tuck in. Stretch these little sides out just so we can, again, encase it totally. Grab it with your hand and just kind of coddle it over so all that tucked together bit is underneath. And then, so that it browns up nicely, we want to brush these. We don't want this dripping all over, but we want to brush them nicely, which is going to help this to get a wonderful, rich, golden color. And then we're going to pop them right in the oven. Okay, these are lovely. Right in the oven. We're ready to go back to risotto. Now, with the risotto, we're going to add some brie. I'm not a big fan of the rind of brie, although it is edible. So I buy this wonderful brie that's already creamed in a container. It's a brie spread. It has no rind, so it just makes things a lot easier. This is going to be stirred in the end of the risotto. It's going to make it just to die for, to die for. We are going to put some Parmesan cheese in as well. And we have our lobster and our shrimp. We sauteed off the shrimp a little bit so that we could add it at the end because we don't want it to all cook for the entire time of the risotto. So we saute the shrimp, have the lobster pre-cooked. At the very end, we add it back in. This way, it's cooked perfectly. It's slightly rewarmed back into the risotto, and there's no worry about the shrimp or the lobster getting overdone. Let me just pick my shrimp out here. And actually, I don't think I'm going to do anything with that shrimp. It's a nice size. But the lobster, look at, we've got some entire claws. I am going to have to chop that up a bit. Oops, here's another shrimp. And all this wonderful lobster meat. Just rinse my fingers off a bit. Check the risotto again. Oh yes, this is coming wonderful. A little more stock. Yep, my trusty spoon. Remember the one I put away because I had it in my mouth. So we'll take this and just... Still a little bitey. We cook this what they call al dente, to the tooth. It should have a little bite to it, not a crunch, but a little bite, the way you cook macaroni. We never want it too soft. Kick that flame up just a hair. I'm going to cut up our lobster a bit, not too small, because people like to see that they're getting their fair share of the lobster and shrimp, so we don't want to make it too small so that you can't tell where the risotto stops and the lobster and shrimp start. You want to have those big chunks that when you get a piece in your mouth, you know it and you have to chew it. It's that big. I think I'm going to check my cakes and move them up to speed them up into a hotter oven. Beef Wellingtons cooking wonderfully. Getting our area cleaned up because we're going to do some wonderful plating. We're going to take a break at the very end and plate everything up so you can see the sumptuous dinner that we're prepared. I'm going to bring my soup back. Kind of like a jumping jack going back and forth. We should have named this show the Bobblehead Show. So I'm bouncing all back and forth. This is just rich and creamy. It's so elegant of a soup that when people eat it and they hear the name creamy wild mushroom soup, they automatically think that there's going to be heavy cream in there, which there isn't at all. Yet we managed to develop this rich, creamy texture from building that roux type base through that technique we called Sanger. Checking risotto again. I think we're getting real close on the risotto. You need to taste this several times. I can start to season up with some salt and pepper. A little bit of pepper. Tiny bit more broth. Just Just want to lower this down so it doesn't overcook. Lobster and shrimp is ready. Let me take another look at those beef Wellingtons. Nice and golden. I think we need another minute or so on those. Cakes are starting to puff up. I think we're doing well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a break for a minute. I'm going to get all my plates out, do a bigger cleanup, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off the risotto. We'll pull out the cakes and the Wellingtons. We'll get everything plated up, and you'll see our sumptuous, elegant menu. Okay, we're back, and I think everything is ready to go. I'm going to pull everything out of the oven. Oh, look at these wonderful Wellingtons. I'm going to just start putting them on the plates as we go along. Be careful not to drop them. And now these wonderful cakes. Talk about molten lava. They are pretty much flowing over. They're just wonderful. I'm going to put those down for a sec so we can finish up everything else. So my risotto now needs my creamy brie. Oh, look at that. It is so rich. I tell you, I could just eat this day and night alone, the risotto. Our Parmesan cheese. I already seasoned it with salt and pepper a couple minutes ago. To put a healthy scoop of that right on our plate here. Perhaps a little bit more. Can't be too stingy with this. Then we'll put some lobster and shrimp. And of course, our wonderful creamy soup. Just look at how rich that is. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that. I heard something interesting the other day when you think about, when we look at life, those who have much don't have more. And those who have less don't have smaller amounts. And it's so true. Oh, come on out. Oh. One more. I think this one I'm going to need to just go around nicely. Oh. Look at that. It just fell right out. A little bit of powdered sugar on these. Get rid of this. And I just need to cut into this beef Wellington to see just how good it is. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm going to need to starve myself for a week so I can eat this for 2 weeks. That is so wonderful, so pink and luscious. The last thing I'm going to do, well, the next to the last thing, I'm going to put a little drizzle of that balsamic syrup over my lovely salad. And one more with the spoon. 1 spoon in the soup. And we've got to just cut into this liquid center. I'm not much on desserts, but this will break anybody's heart. Folks, we did a wonderful, elegant dinner, our cream soup, our composed or compound salad with the pears and oranges, and the candied spiced pecans with those exotic spices like the cayenne and the curry powder. Of course, our beef Wellingtons, pâté de foie, mushroom Duxelles, and a rich risotto laced with brie, topped with lobster and shrimp, and our wonderful molten lava chocolate cakes. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time. You're eating in Westfield, New Jersey. Jump in. This is a wonderful, elegant menu. Enjoy.